Welcome to Faith on Tap, a podcast where we go out to the wilds of local breweries and talk to you about, thoughts and various topics that are important to all of us. Okay, we are at Brass Works Brewing Company in Waterbury, Connecticut. Our food was less than disappointing.
Yeah.
Subpar. They advertised a very good restaurant called Sasso's in Torrington. They get their pizzas there. First of all, they're frozen, so part one of suck. Part two of suck, they only had chicken pizza. They didn't have the other ones. And also, it was just...
Tasted frozen.
It tasted like frozen pizza. So.
Yeah, the crust was tough.
Connecticut, which prides itself on incredible pizza, and it should. This was a one as far as Connecticut pizza goes. It was, it was pathetic.
I was looking forward to it because it was Sasso's.
Yeah, I digress. We took the liberty of asking the people questions prior to this talk because there's trivia going on, and we wanted to make sure we got there before people are absorbed in trivia. But we have a fun question. We're going to have, I know we already have some pretty good answers.
Yep.
It's a deeper question that people were surprised at first. The question basically is, do things happen for a reason, or is everything coincidence?
Right.
So obviously we're kind of putting in the element of someone overseeing the universe, seeing if someone said God and stuff. And I was pleasantly surprised. I don't know how you guys, without giving too much away, were you pleased with your...
I was very happy. Yep.
Your results?
It was a deep answer. I don't know if it was my answer, but it was a deep answer, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, it's a good question, and I think it's a good question I'd like to ask at parties because it will definitely bring it to higher levels. So we'll have some fun, and we'll dissect that question in a bit.
So, Mary, I have a question for you.
Uh-oh.
Do you think that there is a reason for things that happen, or do you think life is random?
You know, oftentimes things that you think are random, when time goes on or whatever the case may be, you say, that could have happened anytime. Why did it happen now? Or So I don't know. I really can't. There is total randomness, but it depends. There's a little bit of every. I guess you could look at every single big thing in your life and say, "Gee, was that random?" Or was that
What is something in your life that you're so glad that happened, and you're convinced that maybe it wasn't random?
Well, we're talking about my husband and I. We met because my brother and his neighbor happened to be working together on the neighbor's family farm.
Mm-hmm.
And they were just talking about a guy they were talking about something. They saw a guy who didn't look so good, had a nice looking woman riding on his motorcycle. And it's like, he didn't deserve her. She was beautiful. What was she doing with him? That kind of thing. And it crossed the mind of my brother as he was talking to his friend that he knew I wasn't dating anybody at the time. And my future husband was in this whole conversation. And they're like, my brother talked to Rick, who's his friend, and said, we got to get your sister Mary to meet this guy because he just seems so nice and so concerned about, why is it? So I don't know, the randomness and
the intention of people who love you.
Yeah, but
that's beautiful.
It was just such a weird conversation for two guys to have when they're working to fix up a farm. And you know what? They're working to do this kind of stuff that without that moment, that conversation, I never would have met my husband.
Where would you be? You'd be an old maid.
Oh, no.
Just checking out the library at this point.
No, I would have found this place.
No.
They have good beer.
Oh, true. Mary, I can't tell you what a delight it is to talk to you.
Oh.
I am so glad that you had those cookies. Otherwise, I probably never would. Talking with Joy. And so I have a question for you for tonight. Do you think everything happens for a reason, or is life mostly random chance?
I absolutely believe everything happens for a reason.
and tell me your thought process on that.
Okay, well, I've had a lot of bad things happen to me in my life. Probably one of the worst things in my adult life was losing my husband in a plane crash. And despite that happening, I was angry at first, but really only for a moment where I really thought that there was a lot of other people that were worse off than me. My son didn't get killed. My husband did, left me in a difficult situation. I thanked God for the fact that my son was saved. I don't really know why things happened the way that they did. If my son had gotten on the plane, probably everybody would have survived because he knew what not to do. Unfortunately, the person sitting next to my husband at the time had never flown before and touched the controls and veered it back to the airport, which caused everybody on the crash to die. I guess things happen for a reason, and having that happen to me, looking back in my lifetime, I can honestly say some bad things did happen to me, but I can also remember things that didn't happen because of God's intervention. I absolutely think that what happens in your lifetime is for a reason.
When did you start developing that thought, or has this always been part of who you are?
I think it's always been part of who I am. I always had a very strong belief in God. I used to, as a young girl, used to take walks and, talk to God and, think about God.
There's a lot of people who would disagree with you. If someone was looking for some personal story from you or evidence from you about this idea of providence versus chance, and they're open to hearing, what would you say? What would you offer to them?
I think you first have to have really a strong belief in God and understand that you're here because of God. You're here for a purpose in your life. And I do remember we had taken separate vacations for the first time in our almost 20 years of marriage. The girls and I went on a camping trip to Lake George and hiked a mountain. At that time, we had another girl that had come along that was a friend of Heather's. She wasn't having a good time. She wasn't athletic like my girls were, and she really wanted to go home. Her mother refused to come get her, but her father said that he would meet her part way if I was willing to drive her. So that meant I had to leave my two girls by themselves at a campground with my dog and drive part way to meet her father. When I was and this is, mind you, the night before my husband died in a plane crash. When I could not figure out where he was. And we got off of an exit. And when I got off the exit, I spun out and then I was able to recover and get off the exit. And it's almost like it wasn't my time, yet it was his. And so you think about that after the fact and you say, that could have been me that could have died. Instead, he died that weekend. We went back for some unknown reason. We weren't supposed to go back for a couple of days because he wasn't supposed to fly back until he was supposed to fly back on a Tuesday. And for whatever reason, we decided to leave the campground early and drive home. When I got home, there was something wrong with the water heater or something, and I tried to call him and I couldn't reach him, and that's when I found out. I got a call from my son saying, Mommy, I think Daddy's dead. And so basically, it makes you think about stuff. When tragedy hits, you go back in your lifetime and you think about things that could have happened to you where, because of God's intervention, it didn't. So I really, truly believe that there is a God and there is a reason why things happen to you in your life. And even though you can't understand at the time why those things happen, and maybe during your lifetime you never will, and maybe you won't find that out until later on.
I think that's really profound what you just said there, because you stated that everything happens for a reason. That's how you start off. And you seemingly don't really know what the reason is, but you have faith in God that there is a reason, and you take solace in that.
Yeah.
That's what faith is all about, and that's awesome.
Well, I mean, the other thing too is to proof that there is a God is after his death. Obviously, it was, I'm pretty much not the sole breadwinner of this family. Have to worry about 3 children.
Mhm.
I was not the disciplinarian in my family at all. He was. So I remember the first time I disciplined my children and they all stood there and laughed at me
Oh, dear.
because it was such an unusual role for me to have to play.
Mm.
They've since apologized for that. They said it just was very humorous to them, because I didn't have to play that
Oh,
role.
that's incredible.
But
Lastly, question: do you think you developed a stronger relationship with your kids because of that?
I think my kids really saw at a very young age how hard I tried to keep the house and keep things together for them. And they're very cognizant of that. I have a very good relationship with all 3 of them. But I do specifically remember going outside to weed and weeding and sobbing. And I felt this breath on my shoulder. It was very profound in that. It was like the Holy Spirit was breathing on me.
That's awesome.
Over a period of time, I wrote a lot of different poems, and I remember being on a treadmill, and a thought came to me for a poem. And I said, oh, wow, that's pretty good. I need to write that down. And I was running on a treadmill, and I said, I'll write it down in a minute. And it was almost like the Holy Spirit said, no, you're going to write it down now. And I literally got blown off the treadmill onto the floor. These things it may sound weird to people, but there is a God, there is a Holy Spirit, and it's very profound. And I think
For sure.
when you have a tragedy happen in your life, you do look back, think about things that happened in your childhood and your lifetime, realize that although you weren't saved from some things, you were saved from a lot, and that was God's hand in your life. Call it fate, call it whatever you want, but things happen for a reason.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you. I know
Very-
it couldn't have been easy to share, so I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. So we are here with Brian. And the question we're having, kind of a full philosophical question. So in your opinion, do you think everything happens for a reason, or things just chance? Is there a combination of the two? Where do you stand on that?
I think everything happens for a reason. I think we are on earth it's our test. We are put in many different situations, and they're all different. And the test is, how do we handle all these situations we're put in? And we can do it many different ways. We have free will. I could get up here, throw this microphone down, and stamp out the door and start screaming.
That'd be fun.
I could do that, and it's on the short list, but I'd rather answer the question. Things happen for a reason, and sometimes things that happen are very difficult. Life wasn't supposed to be easy. It was supposed to be difficult, and how do we handle the situations we're in? So, yes, we make mistakes. We fall. I'm the king of falling down and making wrong decisions when I should. And I think back, and I go, yeah, I could have handled this differently, should have done this, could have done that. But those are the situations put in. They keep changing. Depending on life circumstances.
Well, those are your decisions, though.
My decisions made from the things that are being put in my way.
All right, so let me challenge you. So if you decide one morning that you're going to wear brown socks instead of black socks, is that just happenstance, or you think God oversaw that?
No, I don't think that's something God really cares about. I don't think every single thing
not
is.
Everything happens for a reason.
No, I think it's more of situations where you have to make a moral judgment.
Okay.
There's a wrong thing to do. You can get away with doing an absolute minimum, or you could go and do something very, I'll say, heroic. Maybe not everything's like that, but there are situations in life that come that way. A pair of socks doesn't fall into that. But I think God puts enough challenges in your life. Maybe one a day, it could be one a week, or whatever it is, doesn't matter. It comes up, and we have to make at that time, with our free will, the right thing to do. And how we handle it, I think, especially if we make mistakes, that's sometimes the best way to learn. Is you make a mistake, you go back, I really screwed up, wish I did it differently. And maybe that's part of the learning process. And God's good with that. He wants us to try. Keep trying. We're going to keep falling. We're going to keep trying. It's when you stop trying, you give up. That's when I think things are bad. The way I look at it, I'm going to be standing before Jesus someday, and final judgment, and my life will be flashed before me, and it's going to be, did you do the best you could? And I don't think any of us are going to say we did. But, we can always ask for God's mercy, and that's really what, Jesus' mercy, we went no chance.
Well, yeah, without his sacrificing forgiveness of sin.
So I don't know. I didn't mean to go off on a tangent there.
No, you didn't. Well, I like what you said, and I think it's profound. So let me just ask a follow-up to what you just said. So if you said there's a decision you make, some can be heroic, some can be negative, some can be in between. So when you make that decision, since you said everything happens for a reason. If you made a bad decision, did that happen for a reason?
It was because of my free will. The whole idea is that there's a situation I feel that God put in my way that I was supposed to handle a certain way. And maybe in the beginning, I didn't handle it the right way. I had all excuses, which are good. It might be true. It made me think more about it and kind of change the way I do things.
Makes sense. Thank you. So we're back from talking to our guest, and we're sitting down now at the table. To the right of me, I have Liz. Tell me, Liz, how is January?
It's gray. Everything is gray. Even my coffee tastes gray.
Yeah.
But there was snow.
Gray.
Gray snow now.
The fluffiness of God's redemption.
That's why I have a dog.
You're trying to be the herald of hope.
Amen.
Oh,
I'll take that
quickly.
Wholeheartedly. Yep.
The herald of
Wholeheartedly, I will take herald of hope.
We'll see how we are through this podcast. So we asked this question. I'm surprised we never asked this before. I like the question. Do you think everything happens for a reason, or is it mostly random chance? And knowing that based on the people's perspective, we'd get an array of different answers. When I talked to Brian, who is a Christian, he said, yeah, everything happens for a reason. And I pressed him a little bit and said, well, like when you go to your sock drawer and you pick out a brown sock versus a black sock, is that for a reason? And they said, well, no, that just the bigger decisions, just the moral decisions are things that we are tested, he said, to see how we handle the situations. Maybe they're difficult when you make the wrong decision, et cetera, but God puts those there for a reason. How do you view that, Dennis?
I'm going to have to disagree a little bit, only because I think ultimately the reason is Genesis chapter 3, the fall. That's the reason for all of our challenges. That's the reason for all the bad things. That's the reason for all the hard things. It's not really a moral issue. It's not really a little issue, or, does God doesn't care about our socks. I'm thoroughly convinced of that. So when people say everything happens for a reason, they're usually judging it by a standard of how profound the impact of the situation was on their life. You hear that a lot when people die. It happened for a reason. Well, the reason was chapter 3 in Genesis. The reason was the fall, and circumstances has created within this context of the reason addiction, car accident, sickness, suicide, whatever it is. That's really the reason. I push back against. Let me give you an example. And this is very personal, and so you can take this with a grain of salt. But my mom died of cancer, lung cancer. And the reason for that was she smoked for 50 of the 70 years of her life. God doesn't necessarily always give a reason, but he can always give reconciliation. He can always give redemption. He can always give meaning to the challenges of what we go through. It's not always the reason. God doesn't do bad things to us. God doesn't cause car accidents. God doesn't, it's all chapter 3 in Genesis. When sin was introduced into the world, it ripped the fabric of the world apart, and it set things in motion that are not, or are disadvantages to the human race.
And I agree with most of the things you say. And then I think of the book of Job, where God allowed Satan to do A, B, and C.
Well, and therein lies the sovereignty of God.
Right.
That's a whole nother, is God the puppeteer?
Right.
Or is God, here's my explanation for sovereignty. Yes. And I don't understand it.
Yeah. I think that pretty sums up anyone who's been dealing in Christian circles for a while. You end up with that.
Mm-hmm.
You start off with knowing all the answers, and then you realize you know nothing.
And then it's just, God is sovereign.
Yeah,
He controls everything, and I can't explain that.
Yeah, but it doesn't stop us from trying to find meaning in that. For
Meaning,
example,
yes, I totally agree with that phrase, meaning.
Okay. And well, to that extent, you talked to Joy, Liz, and she found meaning through some horrible situations.
Yes. And she did what I would dare say most, or if not all people, just I don't understand, but I'm going to accept this as the sovereignty of God. Yeah, she definitely had some very terrifyingly sad things happen to her and to her family, but she felt the sovereignty of God in that she was protected when her husband passed away to keep the children safe. And so that's a pretty intense point of view. And that had nothing to do with sin in anyone's life. It was
right.
It
was Genesis 3. It was the fall that ripped everything apart.
Yeah.
Her story. And if you...
The problem with that, and that's not a problem, it's a reality of it. It's that everything happens for a reason. Well, so what's the purpose of praying then?
Well, because sometimes the reason is people fail and people are full of sin and people make bad choices. Sometimes that's God's providence takes that into account. There's this flexibility to his will.
I don't think everything happens for a reason in the context or the definition of what people think. My individual thing happened for a reason. The reason is a bigger picture. Again, chapter 3 in Genesis. What we're looking for in the reason is meaning. And we're searching for meaning in what has taken place. And I think that's where God steps in to bring meaning to, and dare I be cliche, Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk's death has instilled a uprising of the younger generation to reach into and reach out to God. Did God know that Charlie Kirk was going to be assassinated? Yep.
Did he allow it?
Did he allow it? Yep. In his sovereignty, I don't get it, but he brings meaning to the situation and not necessarily reason to the situation.
Yeah. Liz, you also had the pleasure of talking to Mary.
I did. She was a little more hesitant. I don't think she totally bought into the idea that life has providence to it, but she liked to think about that there were moments in her life that had they gone another way, she would be in a completely different position. But she did not attribute that to anything other than, I don't know that she would say it was just happenstance, but I don't think she wouldn't say it either. She was kind of cagey about it. She was not going to give it to a higher power, but she did like the idea that she met her husband in a most interesting fashion, which was kind of fun.
It is.
It was an adorable story.
At the same time, so if it happened for a reason, that means there's thought behind that action occurring, which means it points to something higher than who you are to have that happen. And it's funny how people who don't want to accept God, it happened for a reason. And then if you question them, the universe or someone was watching over me, but they're hesitant to say the word God a lot of times.
So let me ask you this from a physics perspective. Is there that principle of happens for a reason?
Well, I think, I think that's a really good question. I think we're brought up with Western or Greek thinking, and we in our thinking we process information, try to understand why it happened. When I talk to a lot of people, the science people and others about this, an atheist would say, no, there's no reason behind it. It's just a randomness. And so does everything happen for a reason or a coincidence? They would say, well, if you're an atheist, if you're honest with yourself, you conclude that science dictates how the universe operates, which means that the reason we exist is just the random chance of a bunch of quarks coming together to form neutrons and protons. And the protons and neutrons form atoms. And these atoms randomly formed molecules. Then we had amino acids and DNA, proteins, and randomly there is life. Randomly there's sentient beings. Where we come from, well, if you don't have God on your side, if you're a true atheist, you would say that bacterium, fungi, a mouse, and a human are of equal value because there's no more one more important than another. So I guess murdering a baby and stepping on an ant or should be the same value because we're just the same randomness. We're not special. Right. So I would think, so I would think science in a vacuum without God, if you don't want to point to anything supernatural, you would have to say everything is a chaotic universe where randomness just happens and we're just here by chance. Really a lonely existence. I guess, since we went there, I guess this is a question I have then. So if everything was coincidence based on the rule of science, randomly life is created, I guess it would be, do you agree that it would be consistent for an atheist to say that there's no difference between bacteria, mosquito, human, based on that?
I'm not sure that they would necessarily ascribe to that hierarchy because they would say as beings in this species, we're naturally we're naturally going to support our
how did our species get here?
Well, I've heard a couple of biologists that are evolutionary biologists, and they're both atheists, and they say we're basically just fish, just a few steps out.
So
it's actually a very common biological term. Yeah. Says we're just landfish, but that the biological imperative.
So this landfish, why is it more important than a mosquito?
Because our biological imperative is that we want to maintain our species.
Right. So it's a survival mechanism. Yes. It's simply survival.
Where God would say it's the soul.
Well, God would say a lot more than that too. But yeah, it'd start with that. But
it's created in His image.
So if it's just survival, the question is, well, why are we put here just to survive? What's the point of surviving?
There isn't one.
But if I'm an atheist. Okay, so we're put on the earth to survive. Why?
That's a great question. What would the atheist say? I'm not even sure. Like why?
This is the conversation.
It's like there is no why. It just is.
When I asked the best atheist question retort was, why does there have to be a why? Why can't it just be? And it's like you've taken randomness to the next level,
right? That leaves everything very comfortable for you.
Yeah. So and therefore, right, wrong, what you did, there's no purpose to anything. And you become nihilistic. And it's like, there's no point in anything. Why bother being nice? Why bother doing anything to other people? There is no reason. If it's just survival for survival reasons, and then, okay, I survived, I made more of my species, now I can die. That's it? Is that all there is?
Right?
Yeah. Well, that would be, according to atheists, that would be the reason why we're landfish, and I did my job. I survived my species. For what?
Exactly.
So, this is a conversation I do have with atheists, and so when they're put in the corner, they'll say, "Well, it's just a survival mechanism. That's all." They don't want to talk about it any further.
That's their scapegoat. A survival mechanism.
Yeah, that's all they have left after that. If you're going to be consistent with your atheism, you're going to have to say that everything is random, because if it's not random, there's order, and then that's God. So
where does order come from?
So we have to say it's complete chaos, and randomness came from the chaos, and somehow yada yada yada, which no scientist has ever yet found out how we can get life even from amino acids in a natural way. It's never been duplicated once. We're going to say, okay, it just happened, and we now not only just have a simple life form, we have sentient life and a complex human. It just happened through evolution.
I crawled out of the pond.
Yeah, and for reasons which we still don't know. So let's go the other extreme now. So let's say now we conclude that everything does happen for a reason. and God is controlling our actions. I think you were kind of answer this, Dennis. So you're saying God does not control our actions, but everything happens for a reason. You don't believe everything happens for a reason. Is that what you're saying?
I believe everything happens for a reason, and that reason finds its beginning in Genesis 3 with the fall.
So the reason things happen bad is because we fell. If things happen good, it's because
we fell, because we were taken out of the garden and we were put into the world where briars and thistles will impair our ability to produce life or live life. And that's just a really rough interpretation of Genesis.
To me, it puts God as kind of cold and not caring for individuals. Is this humankind just left humankind be its own thing, and the fall caused that you're on your own?
Not so much on your own. The fall caused God to step back and go, oh, okay. And I think it's Romans 1 and 2 where God's passive aggressive. Oh, you want to do this? Well, go ahead. I'm going to let you do this to your own demise. To say everything happens for a reason, the reason is a very big Genesis 3, the fall reason. But God gives meaning to everything that happens when you search for it, and/or the meaning is there, but you have to connect yourself to it. I don't know if that makes sense in my own brain.
No, I do kind of get what you're saying, and that's where we all are, trying to figure this whole thing out as Christians, trying to figure this whole thing out. Does free will come into play then? Do I have a choice? If everything's happening for a reason, if I actually, do I have free will, or is a decision already being made because it's a reason for it? Or does it get even bigger where God's overlooking and knows your free will and sees how your free will give reason? Or are we just going to fall back to what you said originally? It's just because of the fall. That's the reason we have sinned against God. We have fallen, and a bunch of stuff will happen.
Go further a little bit down in Genesis and you run into the Cain and Abel story. So in the NIV, and this is chapter 4, 6 and 7, and the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? Why is your face so downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it." In the NIV, it says must, which is an imperative. But when you go into what that actual word is, the Hebrew word is timshal, and it means you may. It's a choice. You may rule over it. Sin is crouching at your door. You have to make a decision. And that decision will be part of your outcome. It is God saying you have free will, but I'm telling you right now, it's sin.
And so therein lies, it's our choice, really.
Yes.
Outcome, when we want to say that God is in control of everything, he's sovereign, but yet he allows the outcome to our own free will.
Mm-hmm.
That scrambles the eggs of anyone that's in logic. And therein lies our God.
Well, and therein lies the problem with our Western philosophy logic, because we want to say if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. With God, that's not how it works. And that frustrates the heck out of every one of us that have like a scientific background, see cause and effect in all its actions all the time. So let me turn this around to you, Dennis, in terms of everything happens for a reason, and you're to console someone whose loved one has just died. Do you tell them everything happens for a reason?
No, absolutely not. We all die. That's the reality of life. When someone is, 97 years old and they've passed on, I celebrate and not necessarily enter into full mourning of, oh my gosh, this is a tragedy. No, like I would kill for 97 years of life. But then you get to the other side where I've done suicide funerals, I've done accidents of young people. To tell a mom whose son just shot himself in the head over his girlfriend that this happened for a reason, I probably should be punched in the mouth.
Yeah.
That's just so shallow and so insensitive. Even if I were to say my belief, well, Genesis 3 and the fall and it all fell apart. And I deserve a punch in the mouth. Because everything happens for a reason is so Christianese cliche to try to cover up the pain of the existence of chapter 3 in Genesis. I'm sorry, I keep going back there, but
Well, yeah, I mean, you can say chapter 3 in Genesis, but if your baby of 3 months old died of cancer, Genesis
Horrible.
3.
like I could never do that.
But it's that truly it's just because of the fall of man, we're gonna have a bunch of crap happen to us, and it just happened to be your baby. Sorry.
Well, it happened to David. He lost a baby
Yes.
very, very young.
Unfortunately, yes.
And he mourned before and prayed, and then as
when
soon
the baby
as
died, he ate.
Because
He's like, I tried.
Yeah.
I gave it
God's
my best
providence
shot.
rules
Yeah.
over. My sin was.
But you would never say that as a pastor.
No, I know you wouldn't say that, but would you think it?
I come into that as an ideology. I'm not sure I'm so cognitive of it as a parent is crying on my shoulder because their 1-month-old baby has passed away. But I understand that.
You see, to me, it's like I console you. I'm not going to try to come up with an explanation.
No.
Because I know.
Gosh, no.
Because I know there's no explanation on earth. There's no earthly explanation
Nothing.
that I could give that I can understand. It's not like, well, I know the reason. I'm just not going to say it.
Right.
It's like,
you
I have no freaking
idea.
clue.
I've probably done over 70, 80 funerals in my career. And how many times I've been asked why. And my answer has always been from day one till now, I don't know. I cannot answer that question for you because I don't.
Right. The final question then would be the follow-up to this. So now we die, we meet Jesus, talk to God about all this stuff. Do you think at that point we will be able to understand why there's suffering and why there's death at that point?
I don't think we'll care.
I like that.
When we stand before Jesus, I think all of that goes away and there's a whole different perspective. There's a eternal heavenly perspective that we never seen from the earth.
Yeah, I feel like we'll finally understand. Oh, that's how powerful sin actually is. I can feel the repugnant
I like that
feeling of that, and now I know why God despises sin so much. This is, I could,
oh my! I got like God bumps on that one. That's a good one. Holy smokes! Wow.
And on that note, there's our answer to everything about chance and for a reason. Amen.
Amen.
Tune in next episode when you'll hear Dennis say,
How much vodka can you drink?